She understood the law. She upheld it. But when a cop drunk on authority pulled her over and dismissed who she truly was, the situation veered toward danger until karma came knocking with a vengeance. The highway stretched out nearly empty, a dark ribbon slicing through the quiet night. Street lamps slid by in rhythm, their dim light casting fleeting glimmers on the polished black sedan gliding steadily in the right-hand lane. Veronica Caldwell had been behind the wheel for an hour, her thoughts still looping through the classified briefing she'd just exited. As the freshly appointed FBI director, long shifts and later drives came with the job, something she'd grown accustomed to. What she hadn't anticipated, however, was the abrupt flash of red and blue lighting up her rearview mirror. Her hands tightened slightly on the wheel, eyes darting to the speedometer exactly 65. Not over. No sudden swerves, no erratic driving. There was no valid reason to be stopped. Yet the cruiser behind her held firm. She breathed out through her nose and signaled before easing onto the shoulder. Years in the field had trained her not to panic. She'd spent her career embedded with law enforcement, knew procedures, trusted the rules. But as the patrol car coasted to a halt behind her, a flicker of unease stirred in her gut. The officer delayed too long. Veronica adjusted her mirror, trying to catch a glimpse of him. Finally, the cruiser's door opened. The man who stepped out wasn't familiar, not unexpected, as she didn't make it a point to recognize every highway patrol officer in the state. Still, there was something off about him. His stance was rigid, almost confrontational. One hand hovered close to his holstered weapon, while the other lazily swung a flashlight side to side as he advanced toward her. She pressed the button to lower her window, placing both hands visibly atop the wheel. "Good evening, officer," she said evenly, her tone poised and composed. He leaned in, light shining across her face longer than necessary, the beam far too invasive. "License and registration," he barked. No pleasantries, no explanation for the stop. Veronica suppressed a sigh. Something about this was off. "Could you tell me why I'm being pulled over?" Her voice remained steady. The officer chewed his gum slowly, studying her face a beat too long before finally replying. "License. Registration." Veronica stayed still for a moment. Her instincts, the very ones that had saved her life more than once, warned her this wasn't going to be a typical stop. She needed to keep control before anything spiraled out of hand. Carefully, she spoke. "Officer, I'm going to reach for my purse. It's on the passenger seat." No reply. She moved slowly, retrieved her wallet, and held out both her driver's license and her FBI identification. The officer didn't take them. His eyes flicked from her badge to her face, unreadable. FBI, huh? She gave a curt nod. "Yes, sir." Silence, then step out of the car. His tone wasn't loud, but the words hit like a punch. Veronica blinked. "I'm sorry." The officer stepped back slightly, his right hand now hovering close to his holstered weapon. "I said step out." The tension rose sharply, heavy enough to press against her lungs. She had followed every rule, shown her ID, remained polite. Still, this man, the officer, was treating her like a suspect. She had seen this play out before, not to her, not like this, but in incident reports, security footage, and body cam files. She wasn't going to become one of those stories. Her heartbeat stayed steady, but her mind moved fast, mapping out options. She knew how quickly control could be lost. She also knew how to take it back. Before she could decide her next step, the officer lost patience. He reached for the door, and that's when she realized this wasn't a simple traffic stop. This was something far more dangerous. But Veronica Caldwell had built her career preparing for moments exactly like this, and she wasn't going to be intimidated. The sharp sound of the door handle snapping up sent a current through her. Not panic, not quite, but heightened alertness. Her left hand shot out, seizing the interior latch before Officer Daniel Kearns could swing it open. "Officer, step back," she said, her voice level but commanding. "You are not following standard procedure." Kearns didn't budge. If anything, his grip on the door grew firmer. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the door harder. "I said, step out of the car." There it was, the tension in his voice, the barely concealed urgency behind his command. Veronica had encountered men like this before, those who confused power with control, men who tested boundaries to see just how far they could push. But this time, it wasn't a suit in a government office. This was a man in uniform, armed and fueled by a volatile mix of authority and ego. She held firm to the interior door handle. "On what legal basis, officer?" For the first time, Kearns paused. His mouth opened, as though searching for justification. But instead of answering, he closed the distance between them. The flashlight still gripped in his left hand, aimed straight into her eyes, washing everything else in blinding white. "I don't need to explain anything to you." Veronica didn't flinch. "Actually, yes, you do." The light didn't falter, but she saw the tight clench of his jaw, frustration slowly replacing the thin mask of professionalism. "I don't give a damn who you think you are." Her pulse remained calm, deliberate, but she could sense the shift. It wasn't just an overreach of power anymore, it was intimidation. He wanted her to feel small, to feel cornered. But Veronica Caldwell didn't give in to fear. "Then let's contact your supervisor and ask if he does." Her tone was cold, unwavering. That triggered him. He dropped the flashlight. Before she could react, his other hand slammed against the roof of the vehicle, the bang cracking through the still night like a gunshot. "I said, get out." Veronica's eyes darted to his name tag, D. Kearns. She would not forget it. Her fingers twitched toward her phone, but she resisted. Any quick motion could escalate the situation further. She'd seen enough footage to know exactly how those stories ended. So she left her hands where he could see them and looked up, fixing him with the same piercing gaze she had used across interrogation tables for years. "You're making a serious mistake." Kearns let out a bitter, quiet laugh. "No, the mistake was thinking you could pull rank here." That's when she saw it, the subtle shift in posture, the twitch of his hand toward his utility belt. He was weighing his next move. The atmosphere turned electric, thick with danger. And then another patrol car pulled in behind them. Flashes of red and blue lit up the area as another squad car came to a halt behind Kearns's vehicle. For a fleeting second, Veronica felt a sense of reassurance. Another officer meant someone else to witness, possibly some form of accountability. But that faded the moment she saw the new arrival. Another white officer, tall and broad, his name badge obscured by the glare from the headlights. Kearns didn't even bother turning to acknowledge him, which told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't oversight, it was backup. Reinforcements, not intervention. The second officer approached confidently, his gaze shifting between her and Kearns before landing squarely on her. "Is there an issue?" he asked. Kearns responded with a smirk, just handling a non-compliant driver. Veronica paused, choosing not to answer immediately. She was outnumbered now, and Kearns was aware of it. The second officer moved closer. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Not Director Caldwell, not even MS Caldwell, just ma'am." She'd encountered danger before, been in life, threatening standoffs and tense foreign missions. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield abroad. This was her own country, and at that moment it felt just as dangerous. She drew in a slow breath, carefully planning her response. A single misstep, and she wouldn't be the one filing a report tomorrow. They would. Tension wound itself into her muscles, coiled tight. The second officer positioned himself slightly behind Kearns, a silent but clear alliance. This wasn't about enforcing the law anymore. It was about exerting power. Her fingers curled lightly around the steering wheel as she assessed the situation. Refusal would escalate things. Compliance meant vulnerability. No path was safe. "Ma'am," the second officer repeated, voice smooth and falsely patient. "Please exit the vehicle now." Veronica exhaled slowly, her heartbeat steady despite the internal alarms blaring in her mind. She had been in negotiations where a wrong phrase meant death. This was no different. She had to remain in control. She moved deliberately, one hand reaching for the door handle, the other held high and visible. Kearns shifted back, giving her space. The second her feet touched the ground, the night's chill cut into her like a blade. The adrenaline, already coursing through her, surged as her vulnerability grew. Kearns loomed over her, subtly shifting his stance to block the dash cam's view. The second officer remained just a step back, covering the blind spots. It was obvious. They'd rehearsed this kind of maneuver before. "Turn around," Kearns instructed. Veronica stood still. "You haven't explained why I'm being detained." His nostrils flared. Suspicious behavior. "What behavior?" she countered. He gave a smug shake of his head, as if she were just another nuisance to handle. Failure to comply. It was a setup. Resisting would give them a reason to escalate, and obeying would mean surrendering control. She'd studied these scenarios. She had read the internal reviews. Then he seized her wrist, too abruptly, too harshly. Her instincts reacted before her thoughts did. She shifted slightly, avoiding escalation while keeping her movements non-threatening. "Remove your hand," she demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. Kearns held on. The second officer edged in. "Is there an issue here?" Kearns' grip tightened. "She's resisting." Her stomach churned at the words. The second cop reached for his radio, his mouth opening to speak the phrase she'd heard too many times in similar cases. "We have a non-compliant suspect. Not a citizen, not the FBI director, just a suspect." And then the weapon appeared. No pause. Kearns's hand dropped to his holster, unclipped it, and in one smooth motion, a gun was pointed inches from her face. Time distorted. The moment stretched unnaturally. Veronica was trained for chaos. She'd confronted drug lords, extremists, and dangerous fugitives. But this wasn't combat. It was a lonely stretch of highway, and she was defenseless. Her breathing remained measured. Hands up, palms open. Every nerve screamed at her to react, but she knew the outcome if she did. The silence crushed her. Then Kearns sneered, "Do you feel powerful now?" Something shifted deep within her. This was never about a violation or the law. It was about control, about degradation. Her vision narrowed, not from terror, but from seething fury. Not for herself, but for every name she'd ever read in similar reports, for all the voices that were silenced before they could ever be heard. She parted her lips, choosing her words with precision, knowing they could be her last. But before she could speak, another voice broke through the night air. "Hey, I'm filming this." The shout rang out from off to the side, cutting through the oppressive silence like a blade. It wasn't just the words, it was the authority behind them. Someone had witnessed it. More importantly, someone had evidence. Kearns didn't lower his weapon, but a visible shift occurred, a flash of uncertainty, a glance in the direction of the voice. Veronica followed his eyes, turning her head only slightly. A man stood at the roadside, phone raised high, his glasses catching the light from the screen. He wasn't too close, but near enough to capture every second, close enough to make sure the world could see everything. "You really want to go through with this, officer?" the man asked, calm despite the intensity of the moment. Kearns' jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. The second officer took a measured step forward, weighing whether it was time for damage control. Their grip on the situation was slipping. Veronica recognized the look, panic masked as authority. They had thrived in silence, in scenes never recorded, until now. Kearns exhaled sharply, fingers still coiled around his gun, his next move balancing everything on a knife's edge. She pressed, knowing it was the right time, put the gun down. Her voice rang out, firmer than before. Kearns hesitated, his breath ragged, running through possible exits in his mind. The second officer's radio crackled. "Unit 47, what's your status?" Another pause. Then distant sirens began to wail, quiet at first but drawing closer by the second. Backup was coming, but not the kind they had hoped for. Kearns' hand finally dipped, no longer aiming at her, though the weapon stayed unholstered. He turned to his partner. "Make him stop recording." Veronica's gut twisted. She understood the subtext. The second officer began walking toward the man, his hand inching toward something on his belt. Not this time. Veronica stepped forward, her voice more commanding than before. "If you touch him, I'll personally ensure you're charged with obstructing justice." That made him pause. For the first time, hesitation thickened the air. The balance of power had shifted, even if only slightly. The wail of sirens was nearing now, just seconds away. Kearns no longer focused on her. His gaze was fixed beyond her, watching the approaching lights. His thoughts raced, searching for a way out. Veronica recognized that look. Panic, desperation, and desperate men often made dangerous choices. She had only moments to ensure she survived this. But would that be enough? The sirens screamed, drowning out everything. Red and blue lights danced across the asphalt as several patrol cars screeched to a halt. The bystander's phone remained steady, its red recording light a constant, blinking witness. Veronica stayed perfectly still. Kearns still had the weapon drawn, but his posture had shifted. The cocky bravado was gone, replaced by taut nerves and barely contained fear. Doors flew open. Officers swarmed out, hands near their holsters but not yet drawn. They had no clue what situation they were stepping into. Then one officer recognized her, Director Caldwell. The name sliced through the tension like a knife. Kearns barely moved, but the second officer flinched, stunned. His mouth opened, but he couldn't find words. A lieutenant, judging by the stripes on his sleeve, scanned the scene. Veronica standing upright, hands raised, Kearns clutching his gun, and the second officer stalled, unsure of his role now. Then the bystander's phone, still aimed like a spotlight, captured every breath, every twitch. Veronica lowered her hands not in defeat, but as a declaration of control. "Lieutenant, I want both officers taken into custody. Now?" Her voice held no doubt. The second officer shifted uneasily. "Wait," he began. "Don't," she cut in sharply. Her tone was like a blade, slicing off his excuse before it could take shape. "I know exactly what this was, and so does he." She gestured toward the man recording. His phone remained fixed on the scene, unwavering. The lieutenant paused. Veronica saw it, the slow churn of realization taking hold. This wasn't just a routine stop gone wrong. It was the kind of mistake that could ruin a career for anyone who tried to cover it up. Kearns seemed to grasp that too. His fingers finally released the grip on his weapon, and he slid it back into the holster with deliberate care. His movements were calm, calculated, but his face burned with fury. Veronica met his stare, unwavering. She wasn't the one feeling fear anymore. "This is a misunderstanding," Kearns mumbled at last, his voice low, as if even he didn't buy the excuse. Veronica tilted her head slightly. "Oh, then let's clarify everything back at HQ. Call internal affairs. Call the district attorney. This isn't just disappearing." The second officer looked shaken, his skin nearly colorless. The lieutenant finally stepped forward, facing a nearby patrol officer. "Cuff them both." "You've got to be kidding." Kearns snapped, his voice cracking with the kind of outrage that comes when someone used to impunity senses it slipping away. Veronica stood firm. "You drew your weapon on the FBI director, Officer Kearns. Let me know if you'd prefer to add resisting arrest to your list of charges." She had spent years watching justice almost happen, cases buried in bureaucracy, victims treated like criminals. But not tonight. Kearns was still breathing hard when the cuffs snapped shut around his wrists. The second officer didn't protest. He just lowered his gaze to the pavement, the look of a man who finally realized he'd backed the wrong person. The lieutenant turned to her. "Director, are you? Get them out of my sight." She interrupted coldly, and with that, it was done, at least for now. Veronica understood this wasn't just about two bad officers. It was about the system that allowed them to flourish. She had no intention of letting it continue. What followed would be far more significant than tonight. The cuffs around Kearns's wrists weren't just steel, they were accountability. The kind he'd evaded his whole life. He stood there, stiff, his face twisted in stunned disbelief as officers guided him and his partner to the patrol cars waiting nearby. Even now, he clung to hope it would all go away. Veronica recognized that men like him always thought they were immune. Until they weren't. She exhaled slowly. Forcing herself to remain calm, rage wouldn't help her now. Only action. With the man who had filmed everything still stood at the roadside, his phone now lowered, but the camera still rolling. His eyes met hers. "You all right?" he asked. Veronica gave a slight nod. "Thanks to you." He hesitated, then said, "They do this all the time, just not to people like you." His words landed with more weight than expected because he was right. This wasn't rare, she just happened to have the authority to fight back. Additional officers began to arrive, many of them casting sharp looks at Kearns, and his partner barely hiding their disapproval. The lieutenant who had earlier taken charge stepped toward Veronica again. "Director Caldwell," he began with caution, "would you like to file personal charges or—" Veronica shook her head. "This isn't about me. It's bigger than that. I'll be submitting an official report first thing in the morning, and I want internal affairs notified immediately." The lieutenant sighed, rubbing his neck. "Understood." But she wasn't done. "I also expect full access to their disciplinary files, no redactions. Full disclosure." He paused, uncertain, until Veronica fixed him with a sharp stare. "If you think this is going to be swept under a rug, you clearly don't know who you're dealing with." A beat of silence. Then he nodded. "I'll notify them." Good, because this wasn't just about this one incident. It was about every unrecorded one like it. The video went public before sunrise by midday. The Justice Department announced a formal inquiry. Kearns was relieved of duty and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. His partner received indefinite suspension. The department issued a press release carefully worded and damage controlled, but the truth was already out there, and the truth demanded consequences. Veronica watched it all unfold from her office, her hands clasped under her chin. Coverage was spreading fast, and she knew the next phase: calls from officials, press briefings, and posturing from those who would feign concern, but secretly wish she'd stayed quiet. She wasn't staying quiet. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but tonight she did. "Director Caldwell." A moment's silence. Then a voice she recognized. The man with the phone. "Just wanted to say thank you for what you're doing. Most wouldn't." Veronica leaned back, exhaled slowly. "Most don't have the ability." A pause. "But I do." And for the first time in what felt like ages, something stirred inside her. Not relief exactly, but something close to hope, because justice isn't born in silence. It grows when people refuse to look away. So stay alert, share this story, speak out, and never let the truth be ignored.